quick check on the big telecom heavyweights, and that, of course, is BCE, parent company of this network, Rogers, and TELUS. All of them perhaps under a bit of pressure today as the rates that they charge their customers now becoming a bit of a political football in Ottawa. We have both the Liberals and the NDP targeting what they're calling overpriced phone bills in their election campaign, and promises, as Canada, of course, continues by some measures to have the highest cost associated with wireless services among developed countries. Michael Geist is Canada's research chair in internet and e-commerce law at the University of Ottawa. Thanks for being with us.
No, thanks for having me.
So, I mean, obviously it's a kind of a feel-good promise, right? Because this is one of those bills that we all pay. It's practically a necessity, and it's one of the expensive ones. So anybody who says they can cut it sounds good. What is, in your view, the scope or the ability of any party in power to actually reduce that bill?
Well, I think there is some power. I mean, I don't know that anyone's got the power to say we're going to get it down by 25% as a particular measure, and I actually don't think that's a particularly good measure to even use. But there is certainly a link between what our telecom policies look like, particularly to the extent to which we encourage or open the market up to more competition, and what the ultimate prices for consumers look like. You can look at countries around the world that have had pro-competitive policies that have opened the door to new competitors coming into the marketplace, and invariably their prices come down and their consumers pay less.
It's interesting, I was looking at a European study that was comparing the cost of data, and it's really data that we care about, right? Because that's the one that's expensive, and it's the one that fuels all of the stuff that creates commerce and makes our economy move. And when the cost is low, not surprisingly, Michael, the usage goes up. So Finland has this kind of sweet spot of low cost, very high global usage. Canada's at the literal opposite end of the spectrum. High cost, low usage. It's the way a market works. If we switch this around and say, okay, forget about cost, we care about usage, should that be the way maybe regulators should start thinking about this? We want people to be able to use more data. How do we get there?
Well, I think that's certainly part of it. It's pretty clear that our high prices have a drag, I think, on the economy, not just from a consumer perspective, but obviously from a business perspective as well. Businesses may want to adopt e-commerce or digital solutions, and they don't have the ability to go to the market in the way that businesses in some other jurisdictions would, because consumers often conserve their usage or have concerns about the costs associated with accessing things online. I think that the approach that we ought to be taking in terms of at least a metric to determine whether we're successful or not is about the comparative pricing with some of those other jurisdictions. Because even if we were to say that our target is to see a price decline by 25%, if we see in other jurisdictions they're dropping by 30 or 40%, we're actually further behind some of those countries.
Right. So, I mean, obviously the finger gets pointed at the fact that we have a few big players, and with always questions raised, they will say, of course, and we remind viewers, of course, they may already know that one of those players is the parent company of this network. They will say they're very competitive, they watch each other, they lower prices accordingly. Could there be more to be done there? Because we've seen over time various government policies looking to introduce, for instance, a fourth national carrier, and it hasn't really worked. Are we getting something wrong when it comes to actually introducing competition in a way that's fair to the incumbents who've made massive outlays of capital?
They have, and they've made massive profits as a result of all of that. And they have engaged in massive campaigns to stop some of those new competitors from coming into the marketplace. That would be true with the attempted attempt of Verizon to enter into the marketplace several years ago. And more recently, the effort of the government to move towards what are known as MVNOs, mobile virtual network operators, who could gain access to those networks, pay for it at a wholesale rate, and create more choice and more product differentiation in the marketplace. So it's pretty clear they've taken a strong stand against some of those new competitors. And I think what we need is a government to make it very clear that they're going to use every tool in their regulatory toolbox to open that marketplace up, including the prospect of removing all the remaining foreign investment restrictions that we see and rejecting some of the other calls that we see to layer in new fees on wireless services. For example, support CanCon by putting a new tax or fee on your wireless bill.
So we now, of course, stand on the cusp of a new generation of wireless because of 5G, the speed of which will, we're told, unleash things we haven't even imagined yet, Michael. It's important that we obviously have companies willing to make that investment. It's important that they have investors willing to put capital in to make those investments. Do you worry about any chill effect that our big three, which are the ones that are doing it right now, will find themselves unable to find investors because they'll say, look, your regulatory environment is a hot potato and we don't know if we're going to be able to make money here?
I worry about claims of a chill because we've seen that used as a lobbying technique for many years. But the practical reality is that these companies have made investments, at times, in fact, coming together to make investments with some of the shared network facilities that we see between Bell and TELUS in particular. And so we don't even have the kind of network build that you might see in some other jurisdictions. I think the practical reality is that if they won't build it, if we were to open up the market, some others would. This remains one of the most highly profitable markets in the world, but with incumbents supported by some of the barriers that we've seen in the past, the kind of bundling that we see with other sorts of services, it's a tough market to break into. Government policymakers and governments need to be paying attention and looking for ways to reduce or eliminate some of those barriers.
Michael, great to have your thoughts on this. Always appreciate it.
That's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Michael Geist is Canada's Research Chair in Internet and E-commerce Law at the University of Ottawa.